Oh, no, wait a minute. You want me to accept the risk? No, I don't think so.
Scores are not risk. The answer is clearly no.
If you hang around the barbershop so long, sooner or later you will get a haircut. Similarly, if you hang around in the radar of the ransomware groups, sooner or later you will experience a ransomware.
Third-party risk management, we are using AI to get faster at automating processes that are failure. They cause more problems than what they're worth. They really enable bad risk decisions.
Greetings and salutations, one and all. Welcome to today's episode of Third Party. Today's topic, we are going to talk about the dark side of report cards. I don't know about all of you and my two co-hosts, but when I was in school, report card day was always a scary day. I always did really, really well in gym and not always so well in some of the other classes. But of course, my parents would look at it and they would look at the whole thing. They wouldn't necessarily look at the context. And I think that is what a lot of we're seeing out there now is we're seeing people with these one-pagers. We're seeing people with a single score and no context. And we've talked about the importance of context on previous episodes. The attempt is to be helpful. The attempt is to help CISOs and third-party risk managers make better decisions. Does it work? Bob?
Well, if I'd have known we were going to talk about this, I'd have brought my lightsaber, but I guess not today. So does it work? Sometimes, and it depends on what they're used for. But mostly the way they're being used today, I don't think they're very effective. They cause more problems than what they're worth. They really enable bad risk decisions because you're making a very qualitative look at something that might have hundreds of data points feeding into it. And, you look at that, and I think Ferhat, you used averages of averages, I think is the challenge with that. So, yeah, it's easy. You can take a quick look at it. And I've known CISOs that they love things like report cards. They love the colors, that it's the big easy button, but very qualitative, and it doesn't really tell the full picture.
All right. Ferhat, what are your thoughts on report cards?
Well, I think they create confusion. Let me tell you the story from my high school. So some of my friends, when they get the report cards, you need to present to your parents, right? It's not like these days we get it online, but back then the students responsibility to bring the report card to the parents. And some of my friends, when they have bad grades, they were using bleach to erase some grades and change that.
I wish I'd have had that concept.
So, but their parents, they are smart, so they can smell the bleach, and they understand that the report card is not true. So they go to school, get another report card. So now they have two report cards, right? So it's happening like that now. There are multiple companies providing report cards or the scores, and now, sometimes they are conflicting with each other. So which one do you trust, right? These report cards, they create confusion. And in one of our episodes, we talk about the false sense of security. It also, goes back to that. Of course, it's, easy to consume. There is this score that you have, and it will make your job easier in one sense. This vendor has an A score or B score, and we are fine with that. The report is awesome. They have A's and B's all these categories. But what does it really mean? Like how you get that point, how you calculate that score, how you create that report card. We are going back to contextualization. I'm glad that I was able to say that word.
Very well, actually. Yeah.
But you need a context around that report card.
So do we think report cards have any value?
Yeah, absolutely. If they're used in context. And one of the biggest contexts that I think they're extremely valuable is a lot of times a company is going to look for a service from multiple vendors. It's the same service. And they're doing a bake-off of all the different vendors. And that can be very challenging. It used to be you send out an RFP to everybody and have to process all that. But if you're looking at it from an easy way to perhaps cull some of the vendors that you don't want to go any deeper in, you're comparing apples to apples, and a score, if you've got 3 that are A, 1 that's B, 3 that are C, and 1 that's a D, it's really easy to just exclude the D right out of the beginning. So it saves time in that process. So there, I think they have tremendous value.
All right. Any value, Ferhat? What do you think?
No, I agree with that point. If you put the context around it, they have values. But again, you need to trust the data first. If it is a random scoring, it's not random, but it is. If it is not a transparent, scoring, you have all these, reports and all these grades, then it doesn't work, and you are going to share that with the vendor. Vendor should also trust that, but the confusion comes with the multiple, scoring. You send the vendor saying that, hey, you have this score, and they say that, hey, I also have this score from another vendor, so I am actually good. You are saying that I am bad, but I am actually good. So they will defend with another report, and that will create confusions and complexity in the industry.
Yeah, and it's even worse than that, not just sharing it with a vendor. I'll tell you a story from a previous role where this is when the scorecard industry just got started. And I used the service in our third-party risk management program because I thought they had some value. And there was one business unit using a vendor, and the score was really low. I can't remember, it was a D or one of those. So the response was you take that and you share that with the business unit and you let them know, yeah, this vendor is very risky. And they kind of looked at me quizzically and said, well, what does that mean? Oh, well, they're a D. That means they're bad. Well, what does that mean? How did they calculate that? And one of the most embarrassing moments in my recent career, I have more if I go back further.
Well, I don't know. I'm looking at your shirt. That's maybe something embarrassing.
Well, the dark
right there,
side,
Bob.
this is not embarrassing. I love this stuff. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, the embarrassing part was that I had to admit that, well, the vendor has a proprietary methodology, but they're very good at what they do. So here I am. I'm defending the vendor to one of our business units, and I can guarantee you I lost that, and I promised I would never do that again.
Right, and once you undermine your sort of trust once, then everything else is going to be taken with a grain of salt. I think when we talk about concepts like report cards, I think we need to be mindful that sometimes it's about a score or a number, but sometimes there is some context built in there, right? So I don't know about you, but when I was in school, I used to get good grades in some classes, some not as much, but I always got plays well with others, right? So that's some context. Maybe he stinks at math, but he's very friendly, right? So what are some of the things we can do with these scorecards, right? Because we've talked on previous episodes about, it's very hard to change inertia. People are used to seeing these things. We don't want to just yank it away from them. Bob, in particular, you mentioned when we were talking about board reporting on another episode, where you can't just all of a sudden gut what you have and change it to something else. So what's sort of the roadmap for taking these scores, these report cards, and actually contextualizing them so that we can have better discussions and drive better decision making?
So you guys have both said it, context. I'm not going to try the fancy word. You guys both nailed it. I probably won't. But it's having the correct context around the score, and that is additional information. One of the things I like to use, I look at scores as a qualitative way of looking at things, and there is value to that. I'm not saying that they're totally valueless, but having other information that can connect with that. You might have two companies that both have a B score, and are they equivalent? Do they present the same amount of risk? And the answer is clearly no. That just doesn't work. Scores are not risk. They are a qualitative way to look at general hygiene. And like you said at school, that can be valuable sometimes. Bringing other information into that picture that can help paint a better understanding of the exposure that vendor presents. Because you have a B vendor that has $100,000 most likely loss exposure for the year, and another vendor that's a B and they have 10 million of potential
That's bigger.
loss exposure. Well, is it?
That 10 million is more.
Well, you need more context. What if that particular vendor that has 10 million, if they produce $1 billion worth of revenue for your company, and the other vendor that's a B that has 100,000, what if they produce, well, $100,000 of revenue for your company? So they're not equal. You have to have that additional context to make a good decision.
Farhat?
Yeah, that all tells us that, having one score, even with the context sometimes, is not good enough. You need multiple perspectives so that you can understand and assess the risk of working with that vendor. For instance, let's say that a vendor has a B score in general. Okay, why they are B? You are looking at categories and you realize that their email security is C. Okay, why it is C? Then you realize that they have missing SPF record or DMARC record. You are presenting these facts in details, in context. So, but then what? Like, why would I care about a missing SPF and DMARC record? Because it will make them susceptible to spoofing attacks, phishing attacks, and so on. Okay, why would I care about it? Because if they got a phishing attack and if they are, hacked and there's a data breach that will impact us in this way and that way. So if you don't connect these dots, then putting a score is not helpful. You need to connect the dots, first thing. The second thing is that you need to present the data from different perspectives. Risk quantification is one perspective, additional perspective you can provide. If they experience a phishing attack, and if there is a certain mechanism is not there, like MFA is not there, or some other mechanism is not there, then it is very possible that they get hacked, and we will be impacted by that by this much, and it will interrupt our business by this much. That's a perspective. Another perspective is that missing a DMARC record and SPF record might make them more visible to ransomware groups. There's another perspective that you are adding, saying that, hey, they be ransomed and we might be impacted by that. So you need to put all these perspectives into pictures. There's regulatory perspective, there's risk intelligence perspective. So you cannot just present one magical score and that will be it. There is no score like that.
So what do you do in a situation, or what do you suggest people do in a situation where they're going in front of a business stakeholder and the business stakeholder is like, I don't want that. I just want a number. I want a score. How do you fight back against that?
Well, I mean, he's a practitioner. He will know better. But as a researcher, my reaction would be there is no score. There is no magical score that I can give you. I have these perspectives, and based on these perspectives and our risk appetite, we need to make a decision. But I cannot provide you a score that will, consolidate all these perspectives into one, because then it becomes average of average. It becomes too much abstraction. You will not get the value out of it.
Well, there is a magical score.
What is it?
So
rolling a dice?
Well, I should have brought it. I have a 20-sided die, of course, for these types of situations to help me. But no, it's and it goes back to quantitative. And although it's not a score, it's a method to answer that question that you presented. So I had that very scenario, and it's like, here's the score, and they go, oh, it's a great score, so we can use that vendor, right? They go, well, let me show you this. And I was able to present a very justifiable method, and I showed them what the probable loss exposure of using that vendor would be. And he goes, okay. And I said, oh, all right, so you're acceptable with that, and you'll sign, and you'll agree, and you'll accept that risk for the company. And I thought he was going to have a heart attack. And
oh, no, wait a minute. You want me to accept the risk? No, I don't think so.
You know who I'm talking about. That's how he acted. But the goal was to get him to ask me the next question. Is there anything else I can do? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, there is. Here's mitigating controls that can be put in place that can reduce that number. So we took it and we moved away from that score question, because everybody wants the easy button. They want the score because it's not defensible. It's not justifiable. They want to just use their vendor and move on. So there's a way to do that, but you have to change the topic of the discussion.
So it sounds like there's a lot of sort of table setting and sort of prologuing that needs to take place, right? So you got to kind of, to talk about, we're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, then we tell them what we told them. right? So it sounds like the context is we're going to tell them what we're going to tell them, and then the decisions get made there. So I like that. What do vendors think of their own scores?
You'd have to ask them.
Well, we're a vendor. What do you think of our score?
I have a team that we monitor it, and we're very diligent about ensuring that all the underlying components that feed into it are positive. And the reason for that is, well, people look at it and people make decisions. They make decisions on the book cover, not what's in the book. And sometimes that's what a score is. It's just a cover. But it still is important, so we maintain it.
The perspective on the vendor side really depends on how you present the score, right? If you present the score like an assessment of their own work, then it's like calling their babies ugly, right? We shouldn't do that. It doesn't work. They will become defensive. They will say, oh, there are so many false positives in that. They will not accept the real risk in that report. So instead of saying that, hey, we think that you are more visible to threat actors because of this and that, and this is how you can mitigate that risk. If you present it like that, it is more acceptable on the vendor side, because I wouldn't even accept, like if you say that, hey, you have this, you are very ugly. If you say that, I will be very offended, right? But if you say that, hey, if you change your hair, this you will be more attractive, then I will accept that critics. So it really depends on how you present that score to the vendor. If you just send the score and that's it, that doesn't make sense.
So when you told me that you would loan me your hair gel, you were saying I was ugly? Is that what's going on?
No, let's not go there. So there were two things that got said that I kind of want to pull on a little bit. So the first one is something that I have been sort of advising security and risk leaders for a long time, which is we need to move away from this is a problem. If it happens, all this bad stuff's going to happen. To this is a risk we could manage. And if we manage this risk effectively, we can be better, bigger, faster, right? So if we manage our third-party risk, we can onboard vendors more quickly. We can identify single points of failure. So I love, Ferhat, that you pointed that out, because I think we have a reputation for, the sky is falling, the boy or girl who cried wolf, and with few exceptions, companies don't really get put out of business from cyber incidents. So I think we have to be mindful of that. I think the other really more question. So if I'm a business person, I have 500 partners. I don't really have time to sit down with you guys to give me the context on 500 scores. What do we do?
Well, the first we need to start with one thing. You cannot manage what you cannot measure, right? If you want to manage the risk, you need to measure. And if it is 500 vendors, 5,000 vendors, it doesn't matter. If you want to manage the vendor risk, then you need to measure all these vendors so that you can have some sort of a prioritization. But it has to be continuous. It has to come with the risk intelligence, right? Otherwise, it doesn't work. And in fact, the risk quantification is a good methodology, but it is very difficult to do that in a continuous manner, right? It's more like a point-in-time assessment. If you can do it in a continuous manner, you can add context. Otherwise, you have to trust something for prioritization. It is either a one score or a risk intelligence or one piece of information, whatever it is. You need that measurement so that you can prioritize and focus on the ones that really you need to focus on. Otherwise, it is either I will go all 500 vendors or I will do nothing.
Well, and it's identifying and defining risk when you're talking to people, because people, they think about risks, they think about high, medium, and low, and that's their definition. And essentially, they're taking numbers that don't have anything to do with each other, and they're multiplying them together to come up with a risk score. And I say, well, that's the same thing as if you take Pikachus times rainbows equal unicorns. Feels really good.
I love unicorns. Who doesn't love unicorns?
Who doesn't love? Feels good, doesn't it? It's meaningless, and that's what a qualitative score is. That's the problem with scorecards. That's why, as Ferhat said, doing quantitative risk continuously is challenging, and there's a lot of inputs to that, and it can fluctuate. It really doesn't matter. The changes really don't matter. So it's good for point in time to understand, where does that vendor fit in with your risk appetite? Because once you know that, then that additional work that comes with that continuous monitoring, you said that's when it becomes contextual. That this vendor, yes, it's within the risk appetite, and as long as it doesn't go outside of that, or other indicators like ransomware, the RSI doesn't get high, or there's a breach that's been discovered, those things. So it's never a simple thing. It's never just a score. It has to be more than that, and that's what Ferhat talked about, and that's what makes it valuable.
And I want to talk about contextualization that we haven't really talked about, which is contextualization over time, right? There was a very large breach that took place 12 or 18 months ago, and the company's RSI was not actually terrible, but it got progressively worse over a 4 or 5 month period of time. And that's where I think it's interesting to talk about, which is, yes, you might be at a 0.8, but 6 months ago you were at a 0.95, right? Or vice versa. So I think that's an interesting thing really to talk about, which is it's not just about that point in time, which report cards are. And you made a great observation, right? When we were in school, your parents saw your grades 4 times a year. Now you can literally be logged on and see the grades change every day, which makes my kids crazy. But so let's talk a little bit about sort of the trending and changing over time. Do you see people moving that way from a maturity perspective, which is not just looking at the score, but looking at the score over time and how it changes and why it changes? Are you seeing people look at that as well?
To put a context, let's define the RSI. You repeated RSI is a metric that, I am one of the co-inventors. It's a ransomware susceptibility index. We coined that term and invented that metric almost 5 years ago. And since then, we keep, measuring the performance of that metric. And it's a metric between 0 and 1. And what we realize is that the companies with an RSI value, ransomware susceptibility index value over 0.8, 47% of those companies experience a ransomware attack. And it's a huge ratio, because if you talk to cyber insurance companies, they will classify ransomware as a rare event. In fact, it's a rare event. In general, globally, successful ransomware attacks that impact the companies is around 10,000 victims we are talking about. And there are millions of companies all around the world. So if you look in that ratio, it's a rare event. But if a company has enough indicators, if a company is a juicy target for these ransomware groups, they were sending these signals to these pirate ships in these oceans, in these cyber oceans, then they will be targeted. And when we also check the RSI trend of these companies, what we realize is that most of these companies, they actually lurk in the radar of these ransomware groups so long. So there's an old saying, right? If you hang around the barbershop so long, sooner or later you will get a haircut. Similarly, if you hang around in the radar of the ransomware groups, sooner or later you will experience a ransomware attack. And we start to see that we share this research with our customers and outside world as well. And now our customers, they start to monitor the trends as well. It's not just a point-in-time assessment. Right. Now they can be ahead of all these ransomware things because they can see that their vendors are lurking in the radar of the ransomware groups, and they are sharing the report saying that, hey, you need to mitigate these risks to get away from the radar of these ransomware groups. You will become less visible to these ransomware groups, and it works.
Yeah, and you mentioned the scoring trending of scores. So your vendor's gone from a B to a C to a C to a B to a C minus to a B to a C to what value is that? It's very qualitative. It doesn't tell you anything. I can guarantee you most vendors run that gamut. They change, right, because especially the larger vendors, their technology footprint is huge. And to manage that all effectively in an A fashion, it's nearly impossible for anybody to do. So, they dropped to a C minus. Let's send them our score report that says, here's the 6,000 things that caused that to happen. Go fix that. That's no value to anybody. But what Ferhat's talking about, that the RSI, for me, that is one of the most critical metrics for anybody that's monitoring their third-party ecosystem, because and I mentioned this in a previous episode, that is clear and present danger. You can see the bang hasn't happened. Ransomware hasn't happened yet, but what was the number that 47%?
Yeah, 47%.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. It's not perfect. It's not a crystal ball that you can say, oh, yeah, they're at this number. They're absolutely going to have ransomware.
Well, it's not predictive, right? There's a correlation, not a causality. And Ferhat, you and I have talked about that a whole bunch of times.
Exactly.
We need to stop talking about prediction.
Yeah, but the value of that is if I can save 1 out of 2 vendors, from having a ransomware attack ahead of time, left a bang, the value to that is immeasurable.
Right.
And just that one thing. And now there's a lot more than that, but that one thing to me makes it 1,000 times more valuable than a score.
Well, we've talked a lot about context, and sometimes the context that's appropriate is dependent on your audience, right? Ransomware is definitely a hot topic. But I mean, I'll share something with you. So I have a friend of mine, he's a CEO, he just sold his company, and I'm trying to get the CEO's perspective. So I said, all right, why is cybersecurity important? And he went, ransomware. And I went, okay, but why is ransomware a problem? He didn't have an answer. He's a brilliant guy, right? He doesn't have an answer because his IT and security people are not telling him the right story. So I think that's a really, really important thing. And I think the trending, I mean, if you look at credit scores, for example, I get a monthly report from one of the credit agencies. My credit goes up and down a little bit. You know why? I pay my credit cards off every month, but sometimes I buy something big, they run a report, I'm using 80% of my credit. But that's all getting paid off. But they don't build that time context in. They don't look at it and say, well, yes, the ratio is high, but it's always high and it always gets paid off, right? They don't look at that. And they've been doing that for 150 years, right? How old Fair Isaac is. So I think I'd like to transition to kind of one last thing on the topic, which is around transparency. And we've talked about that before. We've talked about I got 2 thumbs and I say so in that model. Let's talk a little bit about the value and importance of transparency in both the scores as well as the context around the scores.
So the story I told of a non-transparent score, that enough for me has changed my view of that. That it
only takes one of those conversations.
Only one. It's one of the things that brought me to Black Kite, is that 100% transparent on how those scores are done, the data, everything about how the operations work, how RSI works, all those things that if I have to have that hard conversation about why this is a risk, why this is a problem, I can go right back to the data, the value of the data, I can explain that. So transparency, huge. Most other places don't do that because they like to have something that's black box, the secret sauce. It's always secret sauce that's going to make you better than the rest. But I think that actually makes you worse than the rest.
I am 100% on board. And Ferhat, the first time you and I actually shared a stage together last year in Phoenix, what I talked about we're at war and we're losing because the bad guys are collaborating and we're not, right? And that's internally we don't collaborate. We don't collaborate with other people in our industry. And the vendors, there's an opportunity for vendors to collaborate. And I've approached people who are in our space, they are not interested. And I think that's the detriment of all of us, right? And that's why I love, and that was also one of the reasons that brought me here as well, is that moving away from extortion as a service, moving away from, you stink because we say you stink, right? And that's why I love the work that Ferhat's team does. And I actually love, one of the reasons I love working with both you guys together in this kind of venue, because you build it and then Bob uses it. And I love that, absolutely love that, because I think there are too many tools out there and you look at them and you go, that's cool. What are people gonna do with this, right? And I don't know if you guys remember, when I first started, we had something called Vendor Map on the platform, and you brought up and I went, okay, that looks good. What do people do with this? And no one had an answer. And then a year and a half later, we came back with the supply chain module, right? Yeah. Which shows you, here's what you do. So let's go back to transparency a little bit, because I think that's a good way to kind of close this. When we go in front of our executive and say, we got to fix this because I say so, that undermines our trust, right? So one thing, what is the value of transparency, Ferhat, to you in the work that your team does in research?
I will point this, transparency should be on every scale of whatever the intelligence or score that you are providing. You cannot just say that, hey, you have a D score or we have a D score, and this is the reason that we have a D score. That you should do. But even if you have a good score, you need to also be very transparent about it. And in our research, we make sure that we tell the story with full transparency, right? Coming back to the ransomware susceptibility index, for instance, the companies with low RSI values, 1.2% of them experience a ransomware attack. So we cannot claim that if you have a good RSI score that you will not experience a ransomware attack, because we cannot see everything. There is insider threat, there is social engineering attacks, certain social engineering attacks that we cannot see. There's a ransomware group nowadays, Scatter Spider, someone called Shiny Hunters. They directly call the support and they get the credentials. I cannot see that through cyberspace, right? So we need to be transparent about all these limitations and considerations. Whenever I explain our methodology, I always have a slide called limitations and considerations, right, that I explain this stuff. Otherwise, you are not transparent. And it goes, in both sides of the spectrum. When the professionals, when they explain these scores to their boards, they should also be very transparent about the good scores as well, not just the bad scores.
I love that. And I think that it's very, very important for us to be open and honest across the range of what we know. And, one of the things that I love actually about what we do is I'm not blowing smoke at anybody. Right? I'm here to help people solve problems. And if the solution is black kite, that's great. If it's not, I'm okay with that too. But I think we need to be more strategic partners. And I think that's where that transparency becomes really important. So any final thoughts on transparency, Bob?
Yeah, I've been in situations in the past where an incident happens and leadership, the first question they ask is, well, do we have to tell anybody? Immediately, it's, for me, a red flag that they don't care about transparency. They only want to meet the letter of the law and only do something if they have to. And I think that's a big problem in the industry today is people always ask that first because they don't want to look bad. And so I just think transparency in all ways, shapes, and forms is a good thing.
And I think I'll just kind of close with one last thing. And I've been saying this a lot lately. We need to move away from the culture of blame that security has sort of gotten into, because that's what leads to people not owning up, right? Let's solve the problem as opposed to pointing a finger. You want to go back and do a postmortem, I'm fine with that, but we need to solve the problems. And clearly, report cards are not the problem for managing third-party risk. Have you ever been asked how your vendor's cyber risk score was calculated and not had an answer? With Black Kite, every score is backed by transparent math, open source intelligence, and a full audit trail. No black magic, just real signal. See for yourself at blackkite.com. All right, gents, we are now at the part of our show where we talk about some research out there. And today we're going to talk about a data point from the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, the DBIR, which is actually one of my favorite reports out there. It's been around for a really long time. One of the interesting data points that came out in the last iteration was that breaches related to third parties went from 15% to 30%. That is almost 1/3, for those of you that are not great at math, of breaches are related to third parties. What's going on, Ferhat?
Well, it's not surprising, and I think that number is based on what we know, right? There are also the breaches that we don't know that they are tied into a third party. Even when we are recording this session, there's a vendor. Because of that vendor, so many companies got impacted. We track these, third-party related data breaches on our website as well, and every week we update the data. There are so many incidents around third parties because the threat landscape is going in that direction. All these threat actors or these ransomware groups, APTs, they attack these third parties because it's easy to attack the third parties, and they know that they can get valuable data out of these third parties. They don't have to jump to your industry. If they can interrupt the supply chain, that will be a real impact. And I hate that when people talk about ransomware, for instance, they only talk about the ransom amounts. Like the ransom amounts is not the biggest impact.
Right.
People have so many studies and research, and we should have research, but that is not the main cost of a ransomware in a supply chain incident, right? It is more about how much that I will be impacted on that one. So many incidents around these third parties we have seen last year that impacted so many industries, retail industries, like when the Clio Blue Yonder incident happened. Starbucks and there are other retail companies, they got impacted and they couldn't provide the services. When the CrowdStrike outage happened, all these hospitals, airlines, they couldn't work for hours, sometimes for days. The real impact was huge. When the Movie attack happened in 2023, the direct number of victims based on what Club Ransomware Group announced on their website is around 200, but we know that they targeted 600 companies. They probably successfully breached 400 of them. But when we look into the numbers after 2 years, the number of companies indirectly impacted by them is 2,600. So from 400 to 2,600, you can see that impact quadruple when we consider the supply chain impact. So we need to look into these data breaches from that lens, and the number is much higher than this study.
Right. That cascading concept, I think, is increasingly becoming a problem because everyone's focusing on what they do and they're hiring everything else out. Right. It's the old GE model. If we're not number one or two, we're going to pay someone to do it for us. And I think that's becoming more and more. And we talk about, software bill of materials and hardware bill of materials and now AI bill of materials. The complexity of these functional process and application stacks just continues to grow. So what are your thoughts on that stat, Bob?
Well, I'm going to look at it from a different view, a strategic view, and I'm going to say that bad actors are faster in their OODA loop than we are. Oh, what? OODA loop?
What is OODA loop?
What is OODA loop?
I see, I know, but so real quick for the folks out there that don't know, what is an OODA loop?
So it's not a loop. It's a framework for agile strategic maneuverability, and it can be applied to. It was first applied in warfare by Colonel John Boyd, who developed the process, but it can be used in, and we actually do use it in all our day-to-day thinking, and observe, orient, decide, and act. And in a warfare situation, which by the numbers, we're at war, that whoever has that process, whoever goes through that strategic thinking and agility process faster, causes their opponents to operate on old information and therefore lose. And if you look at how things are going today, and back to AI, third-party risk management, we are using AI to get faster at automating processes that are failures. All right? Bad actors are...
Automating madness.
Yeah. Bad actors are using AI to automate processes that are already working. They're just becoming faster. So it's that dichotomy to how agile we are. They don't have to go to get approval to do things. With all that, the background and yours, the technology, complications, it just makes it worse. And to be able to change your way you think about the strategy of battling the bad actors in your third-party ecosystems, adding a costume to an AI and saying that it's going to solve all your problems, it's not. You're just getting faster at bad stuff.
I always tell people, if a vendor says we solve all your problems, you should run away.
Yeah.
So, all right, awesome. So, love talking about research. For those of you out there looking at research, definitely take a look at it, but always make sure you understand how it's applicable in your environment.
Enjoying the show? Drop us a rating, not a score, on Spotify. It's the best way to help more people discover real talk about third-party risk.
All right, so now we come to a segment that I love it or hate it. So Ferhat and Bob, I'm going to read you a couple of statements. We're going to vote on whether we love it or hate it, and we're going to have a quick conversation. So first one, third-party scores are legally defensible. How do you love that, Ferhat? It's not even a thing.
We're on the opposite side of this one. I got to hear this one.
All right, so Ferhat, explain to me how third-party scores are legally defensible.
Well, it depends on the context. If you are transparent about your scores and how they can be interpreted, then it is defensible. But if you just put it out there and say that this is the fact that you need to focus on, this company has an A grade or F grade because of this, then of course they are not defensible. There was a lawsuit around this. There was this company tried to have a contractor, and they used one of these scores, and they eliminated some of them in the procurement phase, and the company got eliminated, sued the company, saying that, hey, you eliminated me based on a score that you don't understand. So, see, that's the problem.
Bad decision making.
Bad decision making. By the way, you cannot just eliminate a vendor just because of a score. Of course, you need to put more contacts.
Shouldn't, but you can.
Yeah, you can, but you shouldn't. Something you can doesn't mean that you should. So that in that sense, if you have the contacts, if you are transparent, they are defensible.
I just hate the whole idea.
I'm with you. All right, number 2, vendors should rate themselves. Seriously, Bob, this is even up and down. So in my opinion, I think it's fine to go to a vendor and ask them, what do you do? Show us some documentation. You got a SOC 2 or an ISO report or whatever. But I think we can't take it at face value. I think we need to provide context, and we need to go to independent sources for that, because who are you going to? You're going to the salespeople. They want to close the business, so they're going to tell you what they need to tell you. So,
I mean, if you can enforce a certain framework that they can follow, maybe that's okay, because in certain way there are information that you cannot get from outside, you need to get from inside, right? The vendors, they know the answer that we don't know, right? In that case, yes, they can contribute and help on rating, but of course, it shouldn't be just them, using a random framework to rate themselves.
Because I go, hey, Ferhat, are you handsome? You're going to go, yes, I am.
It's why I flipped. So, any CISO that of any caliber, they're already rating themselves. They care about control flows. They care about their system. So
right, but is that getting out to the customer? Probably not.
Probably not. But it's still, I do it. I use our platform to make sure that that rating is good. But it's all part of our program, whether it's exposed or not. But it's because a lot of people still care about that. Green. They want it to be green.
All right, number 3, we need a universal scoring system. Okay, I don't think we can do this anymore, guys. All right. So I believe we need to have some standard way of figuring out whether people are hitting the standard of due care or not. I don't know which
That's
one
not
it
a
is.
scoring system.
It's so like, I mean, do we need it? Yes. Will we have it? No.
No.
That's very complex. It's very difficult to convince people on a standard scoring system, right? There are very successful examples, like the CVSS on vulnerability, right? It's a scoring system accepted by almost all the cybersecurity professionals.
But people have to be very clear about what it tells them, and I don't think everyone really understands.
Yes, that's why now we have additional scoring around vulnerabilities, like we have now EPSS, we have now LEV. So there are additional scores that we are putting on top of that, because we realize that it's not sufficient. And whatever the scoring system that you come up with for cybersecurity posture, people will realize that, it's not sufficient. We need to put additional things on top of that. But it's good to have a standard scoring system that people will understand, or they will talk the same language as a starting point.
I don't think it's ever going to be complete, but I think we need to have a core system. But what's funny is, and I think you remember this, I don't know if you were there, but when we had our customer advisory board last spring, one of our members is in the insurance industry, and I asked her point blank, do you think that we're ever going to see a time where the insurance companies are asking the same questions? And she didn't even breathe before she said, no, never going to happen, right? And that is the core of their business, and they can't even figure it out.
Right, and the reason why I called you out on scoring versus
you call me out anytime you want, Bob.
frameworks. So
take it out in the parking lot later.
Yeah, we will. So frameworks are the key, and it's what are you assessing against, and having a common set of controls that cover that. That's where you can start speaking the same language. If you look at in the world of AI, last October there was 15. Now there's 54 different frameworks. But yet, if you put them all together, they really are all asking 80%.
I was going to say it has 80% overlap.
The same
But I tell people all the
questions.
time, when I was an analyst, I always said, what framework should we pick? Pick one. I don't care which one you pick, but pick one at least to get you started.
Yeah, and being able to have that common assessment that we're all assessing against the same controls, that's great. Now, how you score that,
That's fair. Yeah.
that's risk appetite. There's so many other things that go into scoring.
All right. So we have another one here. We're a little short on time, so I'm going to put this out. We're going to vote. I'm pretty sure we're all going to vote the same, and then we'll wrap up. Scores should come with breach predictions.
Well,
What?
I will argue the word prediction.
What?
I will argue the word prediction.
What?
Just hear me out. Come. Hear me out. I mean, if you use a different word than prediction, I would breach correlation.
Okay, I'm all right with correlation.
Yeah. So am I.
So you are against that word, like the specific word prediction.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's,
Prediction to me says your score is this. This is definitely going to happen to you.
Yeah, but
That is a huge mistake.
But if you just
Because if
replace
you're
that
wrong
word,
once,
yeah,
that's it. You're done.
But if you switch that word, replace that word with correlation, then we would
I agree 100%.
agree with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
In agreement.
All right. Awesome. So another episode of Love It or Hate It. Hope you love it.
Next time, we are exploring how ransomware fatigue is killing urgency, because apathy might be the next big breach vector.
Remember, cybersecurity doesn't thrive in the shadows. It demands daylight. Until next time.